and welcome back to the Summer Book Club. So this week I am sharing with you, it's a little bit shiny, How to Have a Healthy Divorce. It's a step-by-step practical guide, so I'm trying to read it from the screen backwards, for anyone going through a separation or divorce, by Paula Hall, and it was published by Relate, so it's, again, not a new book. The reason that I wanted to share this with you is that I think it's really helpful that there are some ideas in here which, if you are experiencing separation or divorce, are really helpful to take on board. I noted down a couple. One that I wanted to share is she talks a lot about feelings, and I think I've shared previously how much I've enjoyed reading How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. But Paula Hall really talks from a counseling perspective about how we need to take responsibility for our own feelings. We can't control other people's behavior, and we can't determine what they do or what they feel, but we can control how we feel. And I think the flip side of that, which she also talks about, which is really important, is other people can't make us feel something. They can behave in a way that we don't like, that we don't approve of, that we find really horrifying, but they can't control how we feel about it. That is something that we need to decide. And so I think one of the things that she talks about is ensuring that you put yourself in the most empowered space possible. Yeah. So not always easy. And definitely, if something horrifying has happened, you need time to react. You need time to feel it. Yeah. If you're desperately angry or desperately sad, you need time to feel that. But she also talks about how we shouldn't be giving control to other people over how we feel. So I think that really valuable lesson. She also talks about, and again in How Emotions Are Made, Feldman Barrett talks about this, is that feelings are transitory. It can seem, and I know this because at the moment I am dealing with a significant loss, and it can feel like it's never going to end, that the sadness is never going to end, that it is just who we're going to be now. But I know on a logical level, not yet on an emotional level, I know that's not true. I know that that feeling will pass, that it will be replaced, that the sadness about the loss is not going to go away, but that I won't be sad every day. And so I think it can be really hard when you are going through a separation or divorce to remember that however you're feeling right now is not how you will always feel. And I think it can help because I think for a lot of people, the feelings they experience through separation divorce can be really upsetting, disorienting, bleak. And so to remember that actually this is a really tough time, this is a terrible time, this is not the only way that you will ever feel, I think is a really helpful message. What else did she say? Oh, yeah. So she talks a lot about how to manage emotions. And I think, again, that's incredibly helpful advice, because I would say that most of the people I work with, I see either cycle through really strong emotions, anger, sadness, grief, or get stuck. Some people can get stuck in certain emotions, but getting advice, getting some thoughts about how to manage that, how to manage your emotions, particularly if you need to come to mediation and try and negotiate arrangements, is really helpful. I would say that from my perspective, managing emotions is not about suppressing them, and it's not about minimizing them, and it's not about saying they're not valid or recognizing that they exist. But the question is it helping? So one of the books I talked about earlier in this summer book club was Stuart Diamond's Getting More. And he talks about, is what you're doing helping get you closer to your goal or further away? And I think that's really the key message from my perspective, is that if you're in mediation, what is your goal? Is your goal to express the emotion and to allow the other person to see that you're angry or sad or bitter? Probably not. Your goal is probably to try and put in place the arrangements that you think are best for you. And if you've got children, for your children. So from my perspective, what emotional makeup, what emotional sense gets you to that goal? And I think this book can help with how do you manage your emotions to get to the emotional state you need to be in order to function, in order to maximize how you can get what you need at mediation. She also talks about an action plan, and I think this is really helpful, because one of the things that I often see with people is they feel very disoriented. The future they thought existed, even the present life that they thought existed, has gone. So often they're in chaos. Often things feel very unsettled and uncertain and unstable. And to help people feel there is a plan, I can put some steps in place, I can action some things, I have agency, I think is incredibly helpful towards that sense of empowerment. And so I think really important for people to feel that they're not just caught on the ocean tide. You know, you're not just adrift. Who knows where things will take you, that you have agency. You have the ability to implement ideas, to put in place a plan, to take steps, to create the future that you need. And I think the other thing she talks about, which is really helpful, and I would strongly recommend reading the book, even if it's just for this bit, which is how to speak so that your ex can listen, and how to listen so that you can hear. I would say almost without exception that communication is the biggest challenge that faces most of the people I work with, that for whatever reason, their communication styles may be very different, that people will say things, the other person hears something totally different because the lens through which they're viewing it, the sort of the perspective filters out some of the sounds and creates other sounds from those. So sometimes it's possible for a mediator during the mediation to say, what I heard them say was this, I didn't hear the other part that you're talking about. Can you maybe explain that a bit? And that can help. So sometimes mediators can help to clarify by summarizing what they've heard to see if that sort of makes sense to the other person. But I think what's really helpful in this is it talks about if you want to be heard, you need to speak in a way that the other person can hear. And even from our own perspective as a person in not even a marriage, but just in a normal friend relationship or a work relationship, you can appreciate that if you feel like you're being attacked, the chances of you listening to what that person is saying or validating it, really remote. You're going to dismiss it, you're going to become defensive, you're going to become reactive. And so she actually gives some really helpful advice for how do you speak so that someone can hear you, particularly when it might be a really emotionally volatile situation and you might be struggling to keep control of your emotions and to keep control of your language. So I think really helpful advice in this book. Again, it's an easy read. This is not a technical book. It's definitely a book that's been written for users. Yeah, it's not written for professionals. It is written for users so that people can actually take the advice in here, the information in here, the practical tips in here, and use them day one. So again, that's my recommendation for this week for Summer Book Club, and take care, and I'll see you next week.